Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining our discussion. My name is Tamás Harangozó, and I'm from the European Basic Skills Network. Today, I'm here with Sam Duncan and Esther Mozsina. Sam is from London, from the UCL Institute of Education, and Esther is from the Slovenian Institute of Adult Education, or for Adult Education. Thank you for joining us for today's live stream. Today, we are going to discuss how we can emphasize the role of basic skills in the context of the European Year of Skills that started in May this year. And especially, we are going to focus on a topic that is very important and we can't neglect because of its complexity and necessity for successful basic skills programs, and that is the professionalization matters or issues around the professionalization of basic skills teachers, practitioners, generally. Yes, so we are going to start the dialogue with Sam Duncan. Sam, thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, hello. Thanks very much for having me. Thinking about this topic of professionalization and basic skills teachers, which has really been the focus of my career, I wanted to tell you a little bit about a small project I've been working on, which relates to this area. So first of all, I think one of the difficulties in thinking about professionalization of adult basic skills teachers, and particularly I'm thinking about adult literacy, is we have a tension, I think, between the need for professionalization, the depth of expertise involved, the importance of recognizing this is a career, it needs to be a career, it needs to support, it needs to be trained. But alongside that, we also need to recognize the complexity of the field, the complexity of the subject area, the flexibility needed, the variation in context. So I think we have these two things that we need to manage together, and it's not always easy. And I was thinking about this a lot in a new project I've been working on, which is called Reading the Way. So there's an organization in Britain called Prison Reading Groups, and I think we can share the link afterwards, which has been going now for almost 25 years. And they organize reading circles in a range of prisons. But these are reading circles for people who can read, and they have various other benefits, of course, educational and non-educational. But recently I've been working with one of the chair people of prison reading groups, Sarah Turvey, on developing reading groups for what we could call adult emergent readers. So for adults in prison who feel they can't read. And how can we work with them, but in a reading group situation rather than a formal class? Because there may be lots of reasons why someone doesn't want to join a formal class, but could work in a reading group formation. And this is something I did some research on a while ago. So we've had two pilots, one in a prison near London, one in a prison near Liverpool. And at the moment we're working on a report and guidelines to develop this approach further out. Because in a sense, it's a very simple approach, and it's something that doesn't take a lot of resources, but can have very strong benefits. But the key question then is, if this is not a literacy class, what expertise is needed by those who are facilitating the groups? If we are partly arguing that this will have benefits for literacy development, that we're finding a way to work in a collaborative, in a sense, literature-focused way that can develop people's reading, their reading skills, their reading confidences, their reading practices, importantly. So one of the things I'm working on now, thinking through with my colleagues, is who will facilitate the groups? Because like any reading group, the idea is the group, say we've got 7 men, this should be, in a sense, very self-run in lots of ways, but there also needs to be someone there who's guiding it, maybe supporting with some words, helping generate, helping organize. So what expertise does that person need? And we've started to think of it as, in terms of a kind of jigsaw, So then we can think anyone who comes into the role, okay, what do they already have in their experience and what can we help them develop? So for example, we might say, okay, we think you need to know a little bit about the nature of reading, the process.
Mm.
We might say, okay, but you also need to know a little bit about the context of prisons. You also need to know a little bit about ideas of adult education, collaborative, democratic adult education, perhaps. Maybe you also need to know a little bit about what a reading circle is. And maybe you also need some love of literature or of song or of poetry.
Mm.
Think of these as separate jigsaw pieces, and we haven't worked this all out yet. Then I think that could be helpful in saying, okay, who could facilitate? So maybe a librarian will come forward saying, I can facilitate. Okay, I have these bits of the jigsaw. Can you support me a little bit with this bit? Can you explain maybe a little bit about the nature of reading process? Or maybe someone comes from a teaching background and says, okay, I know about reading, I know about adult education, but not so much on reading circles. So we can help with another part of the puzzle. So I think this sense of trying to recognize the complexity of the expertise that may be involved, even if that expertise is not always obviously on show, if you see what I mean, in a session. So in these reading circles, we did a 5-week pilot. I was in the prison every week. I was never at any point saying, this is what happens when you read. These are the components. But the kind of knowledge of different elements of reading, I think, helped me support the members in supporting each other and encouraging. So I thought this could be just a useful idea to bring into this discussion, whether we could, a lot of national policies on adult literacy, teacher education are based on the idea of these little shorter pieces of a puzzle, perhaps. And for me personally, I think this is the way forward because, you know, we have a context here in England where we have had a very big, I suppose, lengthy, chunky teacher education program for adult literacy teachers, but not everyone can take that. It's not always practical. It's difficult to fund. So we have to think, well, what are other ways to try to understand this situation without saying either there's no expertise or saying the expertise is simple, it's always this, because it's not this, is it? It's complicated little bits, but we can still break it down and have a way, I think, to support each other in that. So I think that was really what I wanted to start with for this.
That's very
That's
very interesting, and it shows just the complexity of the environment that teachers, practitioners, instructors need to go in, depending on the context where they work, and especially in prisons, the regulations are sort of set in stone, so it can be more of a rigid environment to bring some flexible provision into the picture. So that I think that's a great example for showing the expectations towards teachers, instructors. But I was wondering,
isn't it? What we all bring already.
Yeah.
So often in many contexts, people come to this kind of work. Usually they're not 19 or 20, they may be 30, 40, 50, 60. We have lots of expertise already. And rather than saying, okay, away with that, we're teaching you something new, I think to try and unpick what people bring already and what's needed for different roles, maybe.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we also had one comment or one question about the complexity of the issue. Which skills can be seen as basic skills right now? For me, literacy is a big point, but which criteria are used to define them? A question by Stephanie, and I think it addresses the heart of the question of this complexity of expertise.
Yeah. Is this for me to start with, or how do we want to do this?
Yeah, I think we can address it like, how is this, how are basic skills defined, maybe in the context of your project? How can we understand it? You mentioned literacy, literature, and these initiatives or elements of the programs. Are there any skills that are?
So I suppose in the projects Reading the Way that I was talking about, we are thinking really of literacy, so of reading and writing, both digital and non-digital. But obviously those are very broad. And we're particularly focused on reading, but recognizing again that it's very broad. So if you are, there's many different forms of reading we do in our lives, aren't there? And each of them involves a different group of sub-skills. So for some forms of reading, you need to use your voice and eye contact a lot. Other forms of reading, it's much more, the importance is of the decoding. Other forms of reading, we're making many more inferences. So I think it's partly, we could think about breaking down something like reading in as much detail as is helpful, recognizing that not all instances of reading involve the same cluster of skills or confidences, but also how that relates to other things like speaking and presentation skills. So I know one of the members of our reading group was saying how he felt that both the reading aloud and the discussion in the reading circle would help him a lot with job interviews, for example, because it's a kind of form of presentation, isn't it? Whether you're actually reading someone else's words or talking about someone's words using your own word, these are both in a way a scaffolded form of presentation.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's also the context which is often addressed. One other comment also addressed already that was posted in the EPALE discussion page, just how important the context is, and whether we can use this context to improve skills like learning to learn, metacognitive skills, whether that supports basic skills training or learning. Or hinders it in any way. So that's also an interesting point. I think we have another comment, or maybe it's a question. A teacher is like a scientist and an artist in one person who has the necessary knowledge, but the application of knowledge in each specific case is an art. That's a very interesting comment. Yes, I think it also speaks to the metacognition.
Well, exactly, and the recognition that it's not straightforward or self-evident what it means to be a confident writer, a confident reader. Again, it depends on context, it depends on lots of factors. And I think if you are teaching, say, reading and writing to adults, it's helpful to have a lot of knowledge yourself about different reading practices, how we might understand processes, how we might talk about the language in different ways, the writing system in different ways. But then it's how, and I can see one of the comments that also gets at this, it's then how do we use that teacher knowledge to develop skills with our learners. So sometimes we might want to be very explicit about what we're doing, to have discussions. So say you're teaching something with writing, you might want to talk a lot about the relationship between the written word and the spoken word, and why in a language like English it's very different, and what are the different factors over time that have caused that difference, because that can sometimes help learners understand, okay, it's not just me having difficulties, say, with spelling, it's because the spelling system doesn't match the pronunciation for present day English. It matches pronunciation for maybe 500 years ago, or, it's a bit more complicated, but something like that. So I think these kind of things can be very helpful to show this isn't expertise, this is not obvious, this is not basic, this is complicated. And when you're working with adults, I think it's helpful to make those elements explicit. But at the same time, you might not always want to do that. If you have a discussion about a song or a poem, you may want to focus on the content of that, and as a teacher, not necessarily get into the details of the skills that you are actually developing at the time with that activity.
Absolutely, and this is the question, or this might be one answer for Stephanie's question, that basic skills are not basic at all. Maybe we can call them complex skills, but we call them basic skills because they lead to participation in various fields of society. And we just have one more comment from Mark on LinkedIn, reassuring the thoughts you made earlier. I love Sam's comment about not having to state the knowledge, this is what reading is, etc., but rather be informed by it. So I think that summarizes very nicely the approach, or maybe the attitude teachers might take in various contexts.
And maybe how we can understand the expertise of adult literacy or adult basic skills teachers, because one of the things we've suffered from in many countries, I think, is the idea that, oh, anyone who can read and write can teach adults to read and write. And it's not always like that, because in some ways it's a much more difficult thing to do, I think, than teaching at other levels, or at other kinds of teaching, because there may be a range of reasons why someone's finding reading challenging. So I think it's recognizing that there is a lot of knowledge, experience, and expertise that is needed to do this role. It doesn't mean people have to start with that knowledge, but ideally you're developing it as you go on. But in a sense, you wear that knowledge lightly, in that when working with learners, you're making decisions about what to share, what to do then. So it's about, I guess, a vast body of knowledge that informs what seem to be, maybe to the casual observer, almost instinctual decisions or reactions in a classroom situation.
Well, thank you very much, Sam. We wish you all the best for this project and for this complexity of requirements of teachers' expertise to succeed. And I do hope that the current policy tools like micro-credentials maybe can be of use to grab this complex knowledge or expertise of teachers in the future in Europe as well. So thank you, Sam, for joining us and sharing info about the project and your thoughts. And now we turn to Estera. Hi, Estera. Thank you for joining us. Just don't forget to unmute yourself if you can. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Hello, Estera. I had the pleasure of attending your presentation at the EBSN's conference this year in Hungary. And it was very inspiring for this topic of professionalization of teachers, of basic skills in general, because it addressed a personal element, the identity, how teachers see themselves, and how that has a role to play in their motivation to continue to train. Can you please tell us a few words about how this identity factor came into play in your project? Why did you look at the professional identity especially?
Yes, professional identity is one aspect actually of the whole story of professionalization, and not an easy one. It's a difficult one to explain. But I would like to refer to the comment that a teacher is a scientist and an artist at the same time. I'll be touching this comment a little bit in my talk. But yes, I have been working actually in adult education for some time now, mostly in the area of basic skills and professional development of adult educators, but specifically teachers in adult basic education and also in adult literacy. And over the years, we have, as researchers and trainers, realized that adult educators in practice have been actually confronted with two constant challenges, particularly in two aspects. One is actually the need to develop professional identity or professional self-image on one hand, and on the other, actually the necessary consolidation of one as human being, as a person, as a persona. And this is the area where our basic values and beliefs lays, motivations for work and so on. Those areas are also changing because of the changes in society, and this also influenced the roles of adult educators. It became somehow apparent to us that those two aspects actually need to be in some sort of balance, harmony. In our view, when this happens, a professional teacher or practitioner is able actually to cope with unpredictable changes and also become resilient. To be resilient in a professional sense means not only to be able to cope with unpredictable situations, but also to become professionally fulfilled. And this is the personal aspect, actually, that Tamás mentioned at the beginning. Resilience in the professional field is closely actually linked to professional identity. Well, those are difficult words, but to be professionally fulfilled and resilience in practice means that practitioner, teacher, for example, is actually able to intuitively select effective didactic elements in concrete teaching situation. He's able to relate new knowledge, new information to his reflective experience. He's motivated and he knows how to create new forms, new approaches, new methods in the teaching process. But also that he feels that he is part of organization he works for, and also he feels that he is part of a wider professional community of practitioners, which also he enriches with his own experiences and practices. I think that in this performance-driven society, those aspects of professional identity, professional fulfillment, and resilience are not sufficiently emphasized in training programs for different roles of adult educators. But nonetheless, we think they're extremely important, especially for those professionals who work with vulnerable groups of adults.
Absolutely, thank you. It's a valuable thought to think about personal identity and professional identity and to reconcile. I think we have a comment from Egia. Nowadays, one of the basic skills is the ability to learn. Unfortunately, the skill often hinders acquiring all other basic skills. And then later on, Egia refers to active learning and the skill of active learning as an approach to how adults learn and take part in their own learning process. And I know that in your project, you put a big emphasis on participation. Can you tell us a few words about how the action research method comes into play in your project?
Yes. So there is a reason why at Slovenian Institute of Adult Education we actually advocate link between professional identity on one side and researching own professional practice on the other. I'm referring here on a small case of professional practice that it is based on clear methodology and has proven actually to have an impact of professional development of teachers and also adult educators working in other fields. At the same time, there is also clear evidence that the action research approach, when used as a mean of professional development, leads to concrete and also measurable results. So, but well, there are different, probably in different environments, different countries, there are different ways how to strengthen professional identity. So it can be done in different ways, but for example, through awareness of your own achievements, through continuous development of expertise, you can get the help of a mentor, you can connect better to your colleagues from related disciplines, you can be able actually to maintain the balance with between work and life. But most of those areas we have found out that can be explored or included in the actual research process. As said, action research is actually well-known method in education, but in Slovenian case, the action research has been used over the period of a decade. And involve different practitioners from the field, not for only teachers from basic education. We have learned over the years that action research approach actually need to follow some principles in order to be successful. Not every action research actually works in practice. We know that very well. So it has to have the action research goal. In our case, this was was at one point development of descriptors for key competencies, and later on also development of different programs for adults. Then active research team has to be carefully composed from practitioners from different fields, but also from researchers, and they constantly during over some period of time, in our case 1 year and a half, they closely work together and learn from each other.
Mm.
Key steps have to be identified in advance, and they have to be clear to all participants. Small steps of experimenting in practice are actually the key point and
Mm.
very crucial for all members of the group, followed by research of some common patterns, modification of the steps, and so on. There has to be a space for ongoing analysis of the process. And last but not least, at certain point, merging of theory in practice actually occur, and the whole research team actually became aware of that, researchers but also practitioners. However, in the end, action research usually enables the fusion of theory and practice into some new solutions, new insights for all members involved. But not only theory may came out of research. What is the most important thing is how the process of action research has been experienced by teachers and practitioners.
Mm.
And one of the valuable outcome of this process is and was the sense of professional fulfillment and also achievement.
Mm. That's a very nice way to describe it. And it also shows that I really like the part where you emphasize that it needs preparation to create a
Yeah,
research methodology and to establish participation in general in research processes that we know.
yeah,
But it is also true for any basic skills programs or teaching programs that these teachers will continue to work at.
yeah,
And I really like um, the idea of taking part already in the research methodology to reflect on our own professional identity and how that comes into play with the personal identity.
yeah.
So I wonder if there is anything in the research project you mentioned that refers to the individual teacher's ability to form their own professional practice, or how that personal element drives the professional environment, or maybe the conditions that they
Yeah.
work in, how they
Yeah.
change that.
Well, during this period, 1 year or 1 year and a half, teachers are always returning back to their working environments. And we know
Mm.
that, well, not only teachers in basic skills, but also teachers in adult education, usually we call them professionals, but usually they work in this field part-time. So, and they are entering the field and they are maybe breaking up and come back again and so on. So we think that it is very important that their identity as teachers in basic skills or adult educators is emphasized. So there were many positive responses actually from our teachers that they used the method, because in the end they were able to understand the method. Method was not hidden from them. They used the method later on in their other or projects or everyday work, and they're constantly questioning actually their practices, trying out new things with small steps. And I think this is very valuable and enriching actually the practice, their practice, but also
Mm.
us as researchers.
Yes, it definitely sounds like a valuable tool to apply to research your own environment, to modify even or influence how you see
Yeah,
your own
to have the
practice as a
courage to do
professional.
that.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly, exactly. Esther, thank you very much for your thoughts and for being with us. We really value your time, and thank you all for the attention and following this live stream. Now I would like to direct your attention towards the chat or the comment section. We will continue the dialogue on EPALE And please feel free to share your thoughts, feelings about what you've heard now, any project that you found relevant in this case, not only about professional development of teachers, instructors, but also the way how you see the role of basic skills and how we can promote basic skills in the context of the European Year of Skills. So the moderation will continue until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But of course, you're more than welcome to share your thoughts beyond that point as well. So thank you again. I appreciate your attention, and I wish you a successful day. Thank you.